Walking through the wilderness, learning to trust daily. There was once a road that cut through a wide valley, and every day people walked it in opposite directions. Some walked quickly with their heads high, confident they knew exactly where they were going. Others walked slowly, eyes down, burdened by regret, fear, and unanswered prayers. At the center of the valley stood a well. It was old, deep, and fed by water no one could see flowing. Everyone needed it, but not everyone trusted it. One day, a teacher came and sat beside the well. He didn't look important. He didn't raise his voice or demand attention. Yet somehow people stopped walking. They gathered without being called. This teacher was Jesus Christ, though many did not yet know who he was. A man stepped forward and asked, "Teacher, who deserves this water?" Jesus looked at the crowd, then down into the well. "Those who are thirsty," he said. A woman laughed. "We are all thirsty. But some of us have worked harder. Some of us have lived better lives." Jesus picked up a cup, lowered it into the well, and handed it to a child standing closest to him. "Drink," he said. The child did without hesitation. "Why give it to him first?" someone asked. "He has done nothing." Jesus smiled. "Exactly," the people murmured. Then a wealthy man approached. "I've obeyed the law. I've given to the poor. Surely I deserve more." Jesus looked at him with kindness. "If your hands are already full," he said gently, "how will you receive what I'm offering?" The man stepped back, troubled. Another voice called out, "Teacher, what must we do to be right with God?" Jesus pointed to the road. "Love God with all that you are, and love others as yourself." Someone scoffed. "Even our enemies?" Jesus nodded. "Especially them." The crowd grew uneasy. A woman near the edge whispered, "What about forgiveness? Some wounds are too deep." Jesus knelt and traced a line in the dust. "When you refuse to forgive," he said, "you keep drinking poison and hoping someone else will suffer." The wind moved through the valley. The words settled deep. Then a man cried out, "Teacher, the world is cruel. People take advantage. Fear keeps us alive." Jesus looked toward the sky where birds circled freely. "Fear promises safety," he said, "but only trust gives life. Worry cannot add a single breath to your days, but faith can change every breath you take." The people listened, silent now. Another asked, "Why does God feel so far away?" Jesus stood and stepped closer to the well. "Because noise has filled your hearts," he said. "When everything else is stripped away, you will hear him clearly." A sinner approached, trembling. "Is it too late for me?" Jesus met his eyes. "If you're asking the question," he said softly, "you're already closer than you think." Then Jesus did something unexpected. He turned the cup upside down and poured the water into the dust. The crowd gasped. "This water," he said, "was never meant to be stored, only shared." "Who is greatest then?" someone asked. Jesus placed the cup back into the well. "The one who serves," he replied, "the one who loves when it costs them something." As the sun lowered, Jesus spoke one final truth. The road you walk will not always be clear. You will face hunger, silence, and loss. But blessed are those who trust when they cannot see, forgive when they are wounded, and love when it costs them everything. Some walked away unchanged. Some stayed, hearts burning. And some followed him, not because they understood everything, but because they had tasted the water. And once you taste it, nothing else will ever satisfy again. The wind had a strange way of sounding out there, like it wasn't just moving across sand, but whispering secrets it refused to explain. Every step forward felt heavier than the last, not because the ground was difficult to walk on, but because doubt had weight, real weight, and it pressed against the chest harder than hunger ever could. No one plans to end up in the wilderness. That's the part no one tells you. People plan careers, they plan families, they plan futures. But no one wakes up one morning and says, "Today I will walk into uncertainty, isolation, and silence." And yet, that's exactly where some of the most important journeys begin. He had been walking for days, or maybe weeks, time had stopped meaning what it used to mean. When every sunrise looks the same and every night brings the same cold questions, the calendar becomes useless. What mattered now was water, direction, and the terrifying absence of reassurance, because God had spoken. At least he thought God had. That was the problem. The memory replayed over and over in his mind, sharper than the sun above him, but the moment that changed everything, the moment he felt the call so clearly it left him breathless. It didn't come with thunder or fire. It didn't come with an angel standing in front of him. It came quietly, unexpectedly, while life still felt normal. A sentence pressed into his heart so deeply it felt impossible to ignore. Go. Just that. No explanation, no map, no details. Just go. At first, it felt exciting. Purpose usually does. Purpose feels like adrenaline. It feels like certainty. It feels like standing at the edge of something meaningful. Friends had even said it made sense. You've always been restless, they told him. You've always wanted more. But here's the thing. Excitement fades fast when comfort disappears. The wilderness has a way of stripping enthusiasm down to its bones. And once it does, all that's left is trust or fear. And fear is loud. By the third day, without seeing another human being, the question started to creep in. Small at first, harmless, almost reasonable. Why hasn't anything happened yet? By the fifth day, those questions grew teeth. Did I misunderstand God? By the seventh day, the questions became accusations. If this was really from God, wouldn't it be clearer? And by the time the food ran low and the nights grew colder, the loudest question of all began to echo inside him. Why would God lead someone here just to abandon them? Listen carefully, because this matters more than you think. The wilderness does not begin when resources run out. It begins when certainty does, and certainty was gone. Each night he lay under a sky exploding with stars, more beautiful than anything he'd ever seen, yet somehow more mocking than comforting. If God created all of this, if God truly saw everything, then why did he feel so far away now? Silence can feel like rejection when you're desperate for direction. And desperation has a dangerous habit of rewriting faith. He remembered the stories. Everyone does. The stories of deliverance, of seas parting and manna falling and voices calling down from heaven. But those stories skip something important, something uncomfortable. They skipped the waiting. They skipped the hunger. They skipped the moments where nothing made sense and faith felt foolish. No one likes telling those parts. And yet, that's where he was now. Standing between a promise he believed he received and a reality that contradicted it completely. On the 10th night, exhaustion finally won. His body collapsed before his thoughts did. Sleep came fast and heavy, but it wasn't peaceful. Dreams twisted into memories, and memories twisted into fear. He dreamed he was walking in circles, the same rock, the same dead tree, the same horizon, over and over again. No matter how far he walked, the scenery never changed. And then a voice whispered, not loud, not angry, just devastatingly calm, "You've been walking the wrong way." He woke up gasping. The cold had settled deep into his bones, but it wasn't the cold that scared him. It was the familiarity of the dream, the way it felt less like imagination and more like a warning. For the first time since starting the journey, he considered turning back. Not dramatically, not angrily, quietly, just going home. No one would blame him. That was the lie that almost convinced him. No one would blame him for choosing safety over uncertainty, clarity over confusion, comfort over obedience. After all, isn't that what wisdom looks like? But here's what no one tells you. Sometimes the decision that feels safest is the one that costs you the most. He stood there as the sun climbed higher, staring at the path behind him. It looked easier now, familiar, predictable. He could almost feel the relief of returning to normal life. Familiar routines, familiar conversations, familiar distraction. But then another thought surfaced, quieter, heavier. If I turn back now, well, I always wonder what would have happened if I trusted God just one more day. That question hurt worse than hunger. Trust is never tested when the outcome is visible. Trust is only real when obedience costs you something before it rewards you anything. And the wilderness always demands payment upfront. He turned forward again, not with confidence, not with certainty, but with decision. Step by step, the landscape continued to offer nothing in return. No signs, no confirmation, just sand, rock, and endless sky, until something changed. It wasn't dramatic. That's what made it unsettling. A subtle shift in the air, the stillness. It felt intentional, as if the wilderness itself was holding its breath. Then he saw it. Footprints. Fresh ones. Not his. His heart pounded instantly. Relief and fear collided in his chest. Someone else was out here, which meant help or danger. He followed them cautiously, every sense alert. The prints led toward a narrow canyon carved deep into the earth like a scar. Shadows clung to its walls, hiding whatever waited inside. And this was the moment, the kind of moment people talk about later and say, I almost didn't keep going. He stepped into the canyon. The temperature dropped immediately. Sound changed, and his footsteps echoed back at him, distorted, unfamiliar. Every instinct screamed to turn around, but something stronger pulled him forward. And then he heard it. A voice, not shouting, not calling for help, praying. The sound froze him in place, because the prayer wasn't desperate. It was calm, certain, as if the person speaking had no doubt they were being heard. And in that instant, standing in the shadow of stone walls with the stranger's faith echoing through the canyon, he realized something shocking. He wasn't the only one led into the wilderness. And maybe, just maybe, this place wasn't about being lost at all. Maybe it was about learning how to listen. And that realization was only the beginning. The prayer drifted through the canyon like smoke, curling around the stone, lingering in the air longer than it should have. He stood there listening, afraid that if he moved, the sound would vanish and prove it had never been real. Every word felt deliberate, unhurried, spoken by someone who had learned how to wait without panicking. He stepped forward carefully, the gravel crunching beneath his feet. The voice stopped. Silence returned, thick and heavy. Then a figure emerged from behind a bend in the canyon path, older than he expected, weathered, not weak, eyes steady in a way that felt unsettling, as if this person had already seen every possible outcome and made peace with all of them. They looked at each other for a long moment. No greeting, no surprise, just recognition, not familiarity, but understanding. You're late, the stranger said softly. That made no sense. Late for what? I didn't know anyone else was out here, he replied. The stranger nodded slowly. That's usually how it starts. They walked together, without discussing it, as if the decision had already been made. The canyon opened into a small clearing sheltered from the wind. A fire burned low, carefully tended, not rushed. There was water, enough food to survive, not enough to indulge in. Balance? How long have you been here? He asked. The stranger smiled faintly, long enough to stop counting. That answer unsettled him more than any other. As the fire crackled, the stranger finally spoke again. You came here expecting God to explain himself. The words landed too close to the truth. I came because he told me to, he said, defensively. No, the stranger replied gently. You came because you thought obedience would bring clarity. That's not the same thing. The silence returned, but it felt different now, less empty, more intentional. I used to ask God for signs, and the stranger continued, big ones, clear ones, the kind that leave no room for doubt. And sometimes he gave them, but they didn't make trusting him easier. They just delayed it. That didn't sound right. Everything he'd been taught said clarity, strength, and faith. Evidence built confidence. Understanding produced peace. But here in the wilderness, those ideas felt fragile. What if I made a mistake? He asked quietly. What if this wasn't God? The stranger stirred the fire slowly. That question only haunts people who are actually listening. That night, sleep came easier than it had in days, not because his circumstances improved, but because he wasn't alone anymore. Sometimes companionship doesn't remove the wilderness. Sometimes it just makes it survivable. The next morning, the stranger was already awake, watching the horizon. Do you know why this place feels cruel? The stranger asked. He shook his head. Because it removes every shortcut we use to avoid trust. They walked again, deeper into unfamiliar terrain. The path narrowed, then vanished entirely. Every step became a decision. Every pause carried weight. At one point, he stumbled. His foot caught on loose stone, sending him crashing to the ground. Pain shot through his leg, sharp, immediate, real. He waited for the stranger to help him up. Instead, the stranger watched. Anger flared. Aren't you going to help? The stranger shook their head. Not yet. Something about that felt deeply unfair. Why? Because if I help you now, the stranger said, you'll believe you survived because of me. Slowly, painfully, he pushed himself up. Every movement hurt. But he stood. The stranger nodded. Now you'll remember who actually sustained you. That night, as they rested beneath the stars, the stranger finally revealed something that changed everything. I didn't meet you by accident, they said. His heart tightened. I asked God to let me leave, the stranger continued. After years out here, I thought my work was done. I thought I had learned enough. And, he asked, and he said, stay one more day. The implications settled heavily between them. You're that day, the stranger said quietly. Fear and awe tangled inside him. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't random. This was precision. The next morning, they reached a place where the ground dipped sharply downward. Beyond it stretched a valley, wide, fertile, alive, green where there had been only dust, water winding like a promise through the land. His breath caught. Is this it? He whispered. The stranger smiled, but there was sadness in it. For you. They stood there in silence, the valley glowing in the morning light. I don't understand, he said. You will, the stranger replied. Later. They parted without ceremony. No long farewell, no dramatic blessing, just a nod. And then the stranger turned back toward the wilderness. He wanted to stop them, to ask questions, to beg for clarity. But something inside him knew. Trust doesn't come from answers. It comes from movement. As he descended into the valley, warmth returned to the air. The ground softened beneath his feet. Life surrounded him again. And yet something felt different. He had changed. Days later, surrounded by people again, he realized the most shocking truth of all. The wilderness hadn't ended because he arrived somewhere better. It ended because he had learned how to trust God without needing proof. And that truth followed him forever, even now. Listen carefully. If you're walking through silence, uncertainty, delay, or fear, you're not forgotten. You are being taught how to listen. And here's the part no one tells you until the end. The wilderness is not where God abandons you. It's where he speaks the clearest once everything else finally goes quiet. So if this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of a season you're still walking through, don't ignore that. Stay one more day. Trust one more step. And if this message gave you hope, strength, or clarity, support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing to Parables of Hope. Your support allows us to keep creating stories that strengthen faith and spread truth across the world. Go back and watch our previous videos. Share them with someone who feels lost. Help us make hope louder than fear, because your response matters more than you know. Until next time, walk faithfully. God is closer than you think. Begin with love as a daily decision, not a feeling. Jesus taught that love is the highest command, and today, that means choosing patience when irritation feels easier, listening when you want to defend yourself, and showing kindness when no one is watching. In practical terms, it looks like speaking gently in tense conversations, giving your time without expecting recognition, and treating people with dignity even when they disagree with you. Practice forgiveness as an act of freedom. Jesus' teaching on forgiveness is not about excusing harm, but releasing your heart from being controlled by it. In daily life, this means refusing to replay offenses, praying for the strength to let go, and choosing peace over revenge. Forgiveness may be slow and repeated, but every step loosens the grip of bitterness. Trust God with your anxiety about the future. Jesus spoke directly against constant worry, reminding people that God cares for every detail of life. Applying this today means bringing fears into prayer instead of letting them silently rule your decisions. It means doing what you can responsibly, then surrendering what you cannot control, trusting that provision and guidance will come in time. Live with humility instead of performance. Jesus consistently warned against outward religion that lacks inward sincerity. Today, this looks like helping others without announcing it, praying privately instead of performing faith for approval, and examining your heart honestly. Ask yourself whether your actions are about love or image. Serve others in practical ways. Jesus taught that greatness comes through service. In modern life, this can be as simple as checking on someone who feels invisible, offering help without being asked, or using your skills to lift others up. Service turns faith into something visible and healing. Choose daily repentance and growth. Jesus invited people to change direction, not live in guilt. Applying this means recognizing harmful habits, pride, or selfishness, and choosing better paths. Repentance today looks like apologizing sincerely, correcting mistakes, and growing rather than pretending you're already right. Love sacrificially, even when it costs you something. Jesus demonstrated that love is most powerful when it requires sacrifice. In daily life, this may mean giving time when you're tired, standing for truth when it's unpopular, or caring for others without expecting anything in return. Finally, stay rooted in relationship, not rules. Jesus taught that God is a loving Father, not a distant judge. Applying his teachings today means talking to God honestly, bringing doubts and hopes into prayer, and living with the awareness that you are never walking alone. When Jesus' teachings shape daily life, faith becomes more than belief. It becomes a way of walking through the world with grace, courage, and love. Following the teachings of Jesus Christ was never meant to be loud, Dot. It was never meant to be dramatic every day, Dot. It was meant to be lived slowly, quietly, faithfully, inside ordinary moments. Most people imagine faith as something you rise to on your best days. Dot. Jesus taught the opposite, Dot. Faith is proven on your hardest ones. It shows up in how you speak when you're tired, Dot. How you react when you're misunderstood, Dot. How you choose when no one is applauding. Jesus taught love, not as an emotion that comes and goes, but as a decision you make again and again, Dot. In daily life. That means choosing patience when frustration feels justified, Dot. It means listening instead of winning. Dot. It means seeing people not as interruptions, but as neighbors placed in your path for a reason. Some days love looks heroic, Dot. Most days it looks small, Dot. And Jesus says the small things matter. Forgiveness is where many people stop walking, Dot, because forgiveness feels unfair, Dot. And Jesus knew that. That's why he never said forgiveness would feel good. He said it would set you free. Applying forgiveness today means refusing to let yesterday control your peace today, Dot. It means releasing the need to replay the hurt, Dot. It means choosing healing over being right, Dot. Forgiveness is not weakness, Dot. It is strength that refuses to be chained to pain. Jesus also spoke directly to fear of the future, fear of lack, fear of not being enough, and he did not shame people for feeling afraid, that he reminded them where to place their trust. Living this out today means learning to pause when anxiety rises, Dot. To breathe, Dot. To pray, Dot. To remember that worry has never solved tomorrow, but trust has carried people through it. Trust does not erase responsibility, Dot. It replaces panic with peace. Jesus taught humility in a world obsessed with image, Dot. He warned against performing goodness for approval, Dot. And today that teaching is more relevant than ever. Living humbly means doing good even when it goes unnoticed, Dot. It means praying privately, Dot. Serving quietly, Dot. Letting God shape your heart before correcting someone else's behavior. Service was not optional to Jesus, Dot. He tied greatness directly to it. Applying this today means asking a simple question: who can I lift today? It might be a call, a meal, a listening ear, Dot. An act of kindness with no return. When faith moves outward, it becomes real. Jesus taught repentance not as shame, but as redirection, Dot. To turn, Dot. To grow, Dot. To choose a better way when the old way no longer brings life. In daily life, repentance looks like honesty with yourself, Dot. Admitting when pride is taken over, Dot. Apologizing without excuses, Dot. And allowing grace to shape change. Above all, Jesus lived sacrificial love. not convenient love, not selective love, love that stayed when leaving would have been easier. Living this out today means choosing faithfulness over comfort, truth over popularity, and love even when it costs you something. And here's the quiet truth many miss. Jesus did not teach people how to escape the world, that he taught them how to walk through it. It transformed. Every conversation, every decision, every ordinary day becomes sacred when lived this way. So if you're wondering how to follow Jesus today, start here. Love deeply, forgive freely, trust fully, serve humbly, walk faithfully. Not perfectly, but sincerely. Because the goal was never perfection. The goal was a transformed heart learning to walk closer to God, one step, one choice, one day at a time. And now, before this ends, stay with me for just a moment longer. Because teachings only matter when they meet real life. And real life is not lived on mountaintops, as lived in ordinary days, in quiet rooms, in tired mornings, in moments when no one sees the battle inside you. This is where the teachings of Jesus Christ were meant to live. Not in perfect people, but in willing hearts. If you've been struggling, if loving feels heavy, if forgiving feels impossible, if trusting God feels harder than ever, listen closely. Jesus never asked you to carry everything at once. He asked you to follow him step by step. One choice to love when you could have turned away. One decision to forgive instead of holding on. One prayer whispered when fear tried to take over. That's how faith grows. That quote is how lives change. You don't need to fix everything today. You don't need to have all the answers tonight. You just need to take the next faithful step. And maybe, just maybe, you were led to this video because God wanted to remind you of that. If this message touched your heart, if it brought peace, clarity, or quiet strength, please support us by liking this video, sharing it with someone who needs hope, and subscribing to Parables of Hope. Your support truly matters. It helps us continue creating stories and teachings that bring people closer to God and spread truth across the world. Take a moment to watch our previous videos. Share them with someone who feels lost, tired, or searching. Together, we can make hope louder than fear and let truth travel farther than doubt. And as you go back into your life, carry this with you. You are not alone.